Welcome to the Guerrilla Film Guide Podcast Roundtable Edition. This episode was recorded during the One Story, One Community celebration presented by Borland River Media and the Utah Film Center, and is titled Controlling the Chaos, the Roles of an Indie Film Producer. The panel was moderated by Dallin Cerva, with guests Connor Rickman, Kohl Glass, and Dan McBride. We hope you enjoy.
Hey everyone, so if you're tuning in, this is the panel that we're going to be talking about on producing. I believe the title of this panel is called Controlling the Chaos, something like that, which for anybody who's a producer out there or has experience producing, you know that chaos is kind of a part of the job description, and learning to deal with that in healthy ways and channel that back into making the movie work, making sure the movie happens, is a big part of being a producer. So we actually have some pretty interesting people that we get to talk to today on this panel. One person that was originally scheduled is not here. So Kohl Glass, who typically is not a producer. Kohl is a director. Kohl's going to be filling in today for that. And that's actually a really unique and interesting perspective to have, because Kohl is someone who's been working primarily as a director for a number of years, and he's worked with a number of different producers. So I've made a couple of quick notes, since Kohl got thrown into this, to try and kind of get that perspective as well. As a producer, you have to have a really good relationship with your director. It's almost like a weird, dysfunctional marriage that just has to work sometimes. And so that's I think an interesting perspective to have. And then we also have Dan McBride joining us as well. And then we also have Connor Rickman joining us. I know that Emily kind of introduced like a little bit, but I'd actually love to just spend a brief moment and just have you guys do a really, really brief introduction to yourselves. And just kind of, I know that most of the people who are participating in these panels are participating because they have a film associated with this. Whether you do or you don't, that's totally fine. But if you do, let us know what film it is that you have. And just a brief introduction to yourselves. I'll go first as the moderator of this panel. My name's Dallin Cerva, as it says on the screen, and as was mentioned by Emily. I am usually a producer. I do other things, but producing is what I seem to wind up doing the majority of the time. I've produced short films, I've produced commercials, and I've produced a couple of features as well. Most of what I've done is all here in Utah. I've done a couple of commercial things outside of Utah, but pretty much, 95% of what I do is Utah based. A lot of people know me for running the Artist Foundry, which used to be called Averick Art House. That was associated with the Utah Film Center. It was kind of an artist support program that a number of local filmmakers were members of, and they would come in and use resources. And I kind of ran that space and helped, facilitate some filmmaking efforts for a lot of local filmmakers in town. That place is unfortunately no longer up and running due to, nonprofits like the Utah Film Center needing to cut budget and COVID, due to COVID and all that stuff, but still continue to produce and work with a lot of local filmmakers. So that's me. Let's turn it over. To maybe keep from everybody always talking over one another, which is sometimes a problem with the streaming things. Maybe I'll call people out. So just to keep things organized. So Dan, let's have a brief introduction to you, kind of what sort of stuff you do. And if you have a project that's here in playing in this kind of festival thing, let us know about it.
Yeah. My film that was in it just showed in the second to last block. It was called We May Have Been Scoundrels. And I was the writer, director, cinematographer, editor, producer on that. And that's kind of what I do is write and direct, do a lot of that of my own stuff. And then also, I'm producing that stuff as well. I work at a very, very, very small production company up in Ogden, where I also do producing and the directing and editing and all of those things. And then I also help run a group called the 388 Collective, which is a group of filmmakers that we meet every single Monday. We've met for 5 years, and we're constantly writing and producing and creating as much content as we can. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. We're happy to have you here. Connor, let me kick it off to you. Do you want to do a brief introduction to yourself?
Yes, I'll definitely do that. My name is Connor Rickman. I am an owner of a production services company called Overcranked Pictures. And we kind of came about out of necessity when we saw all the creative people that wanted to make something and make something at a high level and have the external stakeholders take us seriously. So that's people renting us locations, that's people renting us gear, for those things, and the crew that you're going to want to get, they're going to want to make sure you're legit. So we put together a business infrastructure that is kind of available on demand for creative people to be able to pay their people, have insurance for all of the people that need it, all the entities that need it, and essentially make it so you can do business as a filmmaker without really needing to go through the process of creating your own LLC just for the purposes of one short film. So our infrastructure is available to creative people that need it in order to make it so they can focus on the creative things and let the nuts and bolts be worried about by someone else. And usually that's me. In this particular program, I'm worried about two films, The Angler, directed by Lucy and Max Nebaker, and Mortal Coil, directed by my namesake, Connor Long. So good people there. And I unfortunately have to leave this panel at 6:15, so get your questions in quickly.
Okay, will do. Thanks. Kohl, I kind of did already introduce you, but is there anything else you wanted to kind of say just as an introduction to yourself and what you've been working on? You are muted.
Myself. How's that?
Good work.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think you did a good job. The film that I am with for this program is Gruff, which just barely played. The last one that just barely played. So yeah.
Awesome.
Not a producer.
Well, cool. Yeah, since Connor's got a hard out, let's get right into it. I wrote a couple of notes and just thinking about the different types of producers that we were going to be talking to today. I want to get this one out of the way first, just because in keeping with the title of what this panel is, I'm curious which film that you guys have produced, and this will be more for Dan and Connor. So Dan and Connor, of the films you've produced, which one would you say had the greatest amount of chaos, and what did you wind up doing, or what did you not wind up doing to help extinguish that chaos? So Dan, go ahead first.
At my level, it feels like every project is just complete chaos. I mean, for instance, like We May Have Been Scoundrels one, we actually shot it maybe 3.5 years ago. And so most of the chaos happened in the post-production stage. Like having to do some reshoots and those kind of things. And I think, like, when I think about the chaos and like how to deal with it or like, yeah, like I think a lot of it has to do with attitude. Because like I said, with the level of like where I'm at and my crew and stuff, a lot of people are working for free or a very, very small amount of money or pizza or whatever. And so just a good attitude throughout throughout the anxiety really helps with controlling it. Because if you're a D-bag and you're out, cussing at people that are working for you for beans, like good luck on them ever working with you again. So for me, that's how I try to handle the chaos, is just have a good attitude and just be really appreciative of everybody on set.
Yeah, well, and nothing kills the vibe, nothing kills morale more than like the producers just like losing their heads and freaking out at people. Every time you're on a shoot that happens, you're just like, how did you get here? You know what I mean? Like, how do you do this? Yeah. Connor, same question for you, man.
Yeah, so I agree wholeheartedly with what Dan said. And I think that the number one thing that a producer can do to make sure that his or her life is going to be as easy as possible in their job is to make sure that there's a mentality in place from the beginning, that you want people that will work well, work consistently, have a good attitude. I think it's a game of personalities more than anything. So even before you even get into a situation where things are stressful and things are happening that you don't want, knowing that you have the right people that can thrive in that kind of situation, I think is the best step you can take. And the same goes for vendors. The same goes for cast. Any person that you can get who will be an asset in a crisis rather than being a liability in a crisis, they're the people that you want to work with. And there's a reason why producers keep going back to the people that they trust and they've worked with before, is because they know exactly what to expect in that type of situation. I think that the number one thing that a producer can do in order to ensure that everything is going to go as smoothly as possible is to run their creative team in a very tactful and respectful way, because a lot of times producers kind of let their writers and directors and actors go off the rails and kind of get whatever they want. And they're trying to compensate for that by turning around on the crew and saying, oh, I'm now have to take stuff away from you in order to give these people what they want. And that type of a double standard really isn't fair. You're all making the same film. And so if you can, a producer's value has a lot to do with the directors that they work with, the actors that they work with. So many producers are hesitant to limit the actions of those creative people. But if you're doing that in order to make it so the rest of your crew can also do their best work, that I think is the most important thing that a producer can do in order to make sure that everybody's working on the same project, everybody feels valued, everybody's sacrificing a little, but everybody's also being rewarded enough to make it worth everybody's time. And it just, I don't like politics. I don't like it when it gets, when there's any sort of preferential treatment or double standard. Of course, some people are going to get paid more than others. Of course, some people are going to have a harder time than others. But to do everything you can to make sure that those experiences are limited and everybody is having as fair of a time as possible, I think is the number one thing you can do in order to just make sure that the movie turns out to be a good experience. And I think that will translate on the screen as well, because a movie that people are happy to work on will show through in the final creative product. There are plenty of movies where it was a horrible experience and it's still a great movie, but I have a hard time thinking of a horrible movie that was great to work on. I think the positivity will show through.
Yeah. Well, and that's that thing that you mentioned about, this producers often catering so much to their creative team, which you want to do to an extent, but they'll often cater to the creative team at the expense of all the other crew members. You see that so much with bigger productions, which I think was so surprising, right? Is that when you see these bigger productions coming into town, sometimes with name directors, sometimes not, but a lot of times from name studios, I feel like that is so common. And it's really, it is too bad, just because, I can list off the top of my head a number of films shot here locally that went on to become really good movies, but everybody who worked on them was like, that was miserable. I hate my life. You know what I mean? Like it happens too often. That what you were talking about actually leads into my next question. And Connor, I'll probably ask you first so you can get out of the way. But my question is, what are some of the crew positions? As producers, we often, especially when we're working with low budgets, we take on a lot of roles, right? Someone asked me one time, what does a producer do? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that, but I can say that a producer does absolutely everything to make the movie happen until they can hire someone else to handle that part of it. And sometimes when we don't have a lot of budget, we wind up doing too much or a lot of stuff. So what are some of the key crew positions that if for you to walk onto a project and decide, yes, I'm going to produce this, you need to make sure that position is filled by someone who is competent? What are some of those positions? Connor, I'll have you go first, and then we'll go to Dan.
Yeah, I think the one that gets overlooked the most is a good location manager. That person is so key, and I think a lot of times there's this idea that like kind of once you have a location, then your job is done. But I think somebody to keep paying attention to it, to keep running it. It's one thing to reserve a location and schedule a time and get it paid and get it insured. And I think kind of that's where most producers would sort of stop. But then you show up on the day and you kind of think like, well, where's everybody parking? Where are we putting trucks? Can we use this bathroom? Do we have access to electricity? It's those little tiny infrastructure things that just make everybody so much more comfortable on a set. So if I'm going to give away any producer responsibilities, first of all, I think the location manager role is the one that I would do. And then of course there are the obvious ones like, everyone needs camera grip, electric, sound, kind of all the stuff that makes the movie happen. But I think having a good locations person, and I think the other one that gets overlooked a lot is a dedicated transportation coordinator. Any show that I've done that has any level of vehicles moving around and does not have a dedicated transportation person, again, just think about how things are getting from one place to another. Most of us have passenger cars that can't fit film equipment, so we need to find a way to get things around. Those are the two things that would make me sleep easier at night, knowing that they had good people handling them. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I got to go, but it was nice to be on the panel.
Thanks, Connor.
Have a good rest of the discussion.
Thank you. Dan, let's go to you with that same question. In your experience of producing things and being able to, on occasion, bring other people in to hire and to handle some of those other producer responsibilities. What are some of the key things that you're just like, I want to make sure somebody good is handling this, so it's not another thing on top of everything else I have to do?
Right. I think having a good first AD, second AD is like, I mean, if you're directing it and trying to do that, like, good luck. Having somebody there that can just take care of all of the things that that you don't have time for. I think that's key. And I've worked with a couple of first ADs that are really friggin' solid, and just the way that the day goes when they're on their game, like the rest of the set, it's just smooth as ice. So
yeah, that's a big one. I was thinking about this question for myself as well, and it's I think everybody's experiences kind of shape what sort of things they appreciate most. And this next one for me is something that when we haven't had the budget for it, either myself or my producing partner will wind up doing it, or we'll bring in like a PA to be, paid a small amount of money to do it. And it's like, that's always so stressful. I love when we can hire a DIT person. Like when we have enough budget for DIT, or at least just somebody to wrangle data. At the end of last year, Kohl and I did a movie. He directed and I produced, and we were shooting on 2 Red cameras. They were Epic W. We were shooting in 8K, right? So we have 2 cameras shooting 8K constantly for this whole feature film, and we didn't have budget for DIT. We did have like a person that we brought on that like had like a little bit of experience to like manage data. But after that shoot, especially when you're dealing with 8K, which takes so long to save, so long to back up, and you're buying so many hard drives, I remember thinking at the end of that shoot, there's no way I'm doing another feature film without like DIT or somebody who like is a professional data manager. Like, right. It's just too stressful because that's the whole movie. You know what I mean? It's everything. It's on these hard drives. And you're just like, So yeah, that's a big one for me. Kohl, I want to involve you in this conversation a little bit. As I said at the beginning, you've been able to work with a number of different producers. over the years. I know we've worked together a couple of times. You've worked with producers that have a lot more experience than I do. You've worked with producers from LA who were coming in to shoot a thing. And I'm curious, what are some of the key things that you are hoping for in a producer? Because I know sometimes directors don't get to pick their producers. Sometimes, you get hired by the producer. Sometimes you do get to pick, depending on how involved you are in development. But what are some of the key things that have become so important to you in a producer's personality and the way in which they handle their job?
Well, that's a good question. I think the thing I'm going to say, the number one thing is professional courtesy. And that was something that, going through school, I went to BYU and like made films here, and like, we were all kind of going ahead, and there was a lot of, there wasn't a lot of, just in general, I'm not naming names or anything, but there was just this general, like, I had to go fight for everything that really mattered to me, And then I made a movie for Lifetime, and I had some LA producers, and I feel like I didn't have to fight for anything. Like anytime I said, hey, it'd be nice if I had this, they're like, oh yes, we need that. You need that. To do your job, you need this thing. And that was really mind-opening to kind of see, a different attitude. And understandably, the general attitude here is, can we cut corners? Can we cut, like there's been times somebody's like, do you think you could do this without a first AD? And it's like, that is insane, right? Like that's like, I don't work without a first AD. It's a pretty pivotal position, as Dan has said. And so, that's something that I look for when I'm working with people is, are they trying to facilitate, or are they trying to see how I can cut corners? And and there's times when you have to cut corners, right? Like you have to every single time. The interesting thing about shooting You May Now Kill the Bride was there was some really bad things that happened on that set. Like at one point, Connor talking about the locations manager, we rented a place to shoot at, and the homeowners came home early and like threatened to call the police because, they saw their house dismantled, and when we were like, no, we're going to put it back, promise. But it was stressful, and
That's
but like
chaos.
it's chaos. But like there was never a time when like I started taking stuff onto me, like, oh man, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Right.
And the producer was like, I have 2 backup plans. Like, settle down. Like, go do your job. This isn't your job. And that was a relief to suddenly see, because, again, when you a lot of times when you make films here, if there's a problem on set, it's everybody's problem, and there's not a lot of people who are going to say, I'm going to deal with this. You need to be directing. You need to be working, focusing on your shots or whatever. And so that's probably one of the things that I look for a lot is just somebody who's going to facilitate a vision and not like, hey, Kohl, you just go and check off these shots that you need to get. Cut half the shots, check off the other half when you're done shooting them, and we'll call it good, And it sounds flippant, but that's actually kind of an attitude that I have encountered sometimes.
Right. Speaking of like, things getting hectic on set and, having those moments, I'm curious, Dan, with you, are there certain like producing partners that you like to work with? I mean, producing is such a big job, especially if you're doing a feature film, or even if you're doing like a really intensive short film. There's so many things to handle that I find that most people who've been producing for a little while have kind of figured out, like, I can't do this on my own. I need to have producing partners or people who hire certain things. And I'm curious, how do those relationships work with you? And, what sort of things do you feel that you're really good at and you handle as a producer, but what things do you always want to try and delegate to someone else on your producing team? So take that away, Dan.
Yeah. So one of the guys I work with a lot is McLean Drake. He and I have kind of worked together for quite a while, and he'll take on a lot of the responsibilities that I'm not good at. If it's something that's like I've got to sell something, or I've got to sell our production, or like if we need a location, I'm not good at selling things. He can go and talk to anybody about anything for forever, and so that I feel like that's a really good team. I'm more of like a creative guy, and he's more of like the business relationship guy. So like together as a producing team, I feel like we're pretty effective. And so yeah, if it takes personality, I just gotta take my step out of it and let him take control of those kind of things.
That's definitely a good person to have, somebody who can handle that kind of like schmoozy businessy side of the business, which is like the most disgusting thing that nobody wants to deal with. But yeah, like it's a part of the industry, right?
Yeah.
I thinking about that for myself, and I think I'm going to continue just answering questions that I pose myself since Connor had to bail as well,
Right.
just so we have some variety in it. I think about, my producing partner is my wife, Jacqueline, which I know some partners can't really, some spouses can't really work together. We do okay. We do fine. We actually tend to fight less when we're working together than when we're working on separate things, which is weird. But
that's the same thing with me and McLean.
Yeah, it's a marriage no matter what, right? And I think that I'm a big prepper, right? So in pre-production, I'm like, this is my world. I need to prep. I need to make sure the director has what he needs. I need to make sure that we're getting all the boxes checked and that we're ready to go. But I often get too busy doing everything that I don't have a plan B, right? I'm not prepared for my plan to fall through. And often when you're producing something, your plan falls through, or something happens, or somebody who you asked to do something doesn't do it, and then you have a problem on your hands. And I always work on not being that producer that's always showing my emotion and showing that I'm freaking out. I think people can tell because I kind of like glaze over and I get this 1,000-foot stare, but I don't start like throwing chairs around. My producing partner, Jacqueline, is very calm and collected. She's not a planner. She doesn't prep for anything, right? She's usually coming on as either a producer or a UPM. But her whole thing is she's very intelligent. She's very sharp. She thinks very quickly. And so she's always like, whatever, we'll handle it. Here's what we'll do, And so it's nice to have somebody who's calm and collected, who may not be a planner, but they're just able to figure something out on the spot. Because sometimes when things get too crazy, I hit this point where I'm like, I need to go find a quiet room and think through this. But you may not have time to do that.
Right.
You just need to make a decision right then. And so it's good to have, different personalities, I think, because producing covers so much ground. It's good to have different personalities and different roles. And I think that, anybody who's tuning into this who wants to be a producer, you can't do it all yourself. If you're going to do legitimate content, you can't produce it all. Like, you have to have partners. And I think it's so important to find people with different skill sets and different personalities to take on those things that where you struggle, where you're not necessarily equipped to handle. So yeah. And I wanted to ask another question here. I'm looking through my notes. Has there ever been a time on set, keeping with the theme of this panel, has there ever been a time on set when you were maybe, as a producer, things were getting crazy, things were getting chaotic, and you were thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're going to do. And somebody else comes in and is like, here's what we're going to do. Here's this, here's the answer to the problem. And they kind of, you learn from somebody else who maybe wasn't hired to be the producer, but you just see how someone comes in and handles the thing. And you're like, that's great. I wish I could have, thought of that. I wish I could have. And a part of the reason why I think about this question is if you ever watched the Star Wars films, okay, on the bonus footage of Star Wars Episode 3. I know a lot of us don't like the prequels. We don't have to get into that. That's not what we're here to talk
That's
about.
a whole other panel.
Yeah, that's a whole other panel that I don't want to be involved in. But on the DVD extras of Star Wars Episode 3, they have this really interesting kind of behind the scenes footage where they were shooting in some desert in Africa, I don't remember where, and they had built these they had built like the pod racer thingies. Or no, yeah, because it was behind the scenes footage for Episode 1, but it was on the Episode 3 disc. I don't know why, but okay. So they have all these sets set up, right? And they set them up, they leave them overnight, they come back the next morning, and there was a sandstorm that had destroyed everything, okay? The lead producer on Star Wars gets to set and he is flipping out. Like the DVD is just like bleep, bleep, bleep. Like he's losing his mind, and he's losing his mind in front of everybody. Okay. Uh-huh. George Lucas shows up a little later because maybe he had a different call time, right? Who has a lot of experience as a producer, but on those films, he was there to be a director primarily. He was also producing, and it was crazy because he steps up and people rush him and like, here's everything that's wrong. Here's what happened. All our sets are destroyed. Everything's destroyed because of the sandstorm. And he very calmly was just like, okay. And you see him sit and think, and he's like, okay, I know that this person has this other shoot at this time, and this person has this thing going on, But he sits and he reorganizes the schedule in his head, right? And it's like, here's what we're going to do. It's going to cost us a little bit of money, but it's not going to be a big deal. We'll get back on track, because he just very calmly knew everything that everybody was doing for the next couple of years and just handled it. Have you ever had an experience like that where you're on a set and you're kind of losing your mind, like, I don't know what's going to happen, and somebody came in and was like, nah, here's what we'll do? And that question can be for either of you, really, because it can be for a director or a producer. Any thoughts where you've been freaking out and someone just like came in and like showed you how to relax?
Yeah. I can't think of anything specific, but there's always, as you learn like how a film set works, like who you shouldn't talk to, but I think as a producer, I mostly produce and direct, right? So as that role, being open to listening to anybody, I think is crazy important. Because I know we've had like major makeup issues that I know zero about makeup, and having someone who might know a little more be like, I tried this on another film that and being open and willing to listen instead of being like, I'm the producer, don't talk to me. I think that's really important. But I can't think of anything specific right now about
that's a great
big
point,
issue.
Though. You bring up that point of like, just because you're the producer, right, doesn't mean that you're an expert at everything, right? Like, you have to listen to those other roles. Sometimes I've been producing a movie where, I have so many credits to my name, but sometimes I'm working with somebody who's a costume designer who's been on way more films than I have. You know what I mean? They've been in the industry for like 40 years, and I've been in the industry for like 12. And it's always important to keep that ego, checked at the door, so that you can learn from those people who may know certain aspects about filmmaking that you don't know. So yeah. Kohl, anything you want to add to that, or any thoughts that you had kind of related to what we're talking about?
Yeah, the only instance that I can think of was the one that I already brought up, where we were, I started freaking out about stuff and like had a lot of, stress and anxiety, and the producer just came and said, no, this is totally handled. Like, I've got it handled. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of, it's nice when you encounter someone, you realize that, like, you can trust them. And that sounds like a lame thing to say, I guess, but when you start making films, like if you're in film school and you're working on everybody's film, and then you work on your film, right? Like, no one cares about your film as much as you do. Yeah. Right? Like, nobody does. And even, like my first films, like I wrote and directed those, and I did a lot of producing on them. I generally try not to take any kind of producing credit, but when you're making an independent film, the director always ends up doing some producing, and like nobody cares. Like, so you kind of have to go around and make sure everybody's doing, if this is your baby, this is your student film, then you got to make sure everybody's doing the best they can without the motivation of having this be their baby. And you can always flip it around. You're like, yeah, I gaffed on tons and tons of student films, and I always want to make sure I did a good job, but I wasn't like killing myself because it was my buddy's short film, and we were gonna make this whatever.
Yeah.
And so when you come from that mentality, you kind of hang on to it, I think, a little too long. At least I did, where and no matter what I would direct, years and years and years down the road, I would always be like, I have to be in everybody's business, and it wasn't until I hit somebody who was like so competent at their job that they're just like, stay in your lane, Kohl, get out. Like, what I'm saying? I will make sure that this happens. You don't, right? You look at your shot list and you talk to the actors and you talk to the DP, and the rest, just let it go, And that was really wonderful to realize that like I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I think that there's a lot of times producers feel that way. They're just like, oh man, I'm the only one prepared here and whatever. And that can be, it's just nice when you have somebody that you're going to say, I am no longer going to worry about whether you're doing your job.
Right.
Because I know you're going to be doing your job.
Yeah. Getting to that point, I think it's a whole new side of filmmaking, right? That makes it feel like you're actually, you're making films with professionals. But being an accountable person, right? Taking accountability for things, especially when you care about it, it's always going to be difficult to trust. I think like trust is a big thing that a director, especially someone like yourself, where you're trying to, go hands off, you have to trust in those producers, and you have to trust those people. And I see all the time, I work with a lot of, local filmmakers, low budget sort of stuff. And, with my work that I was doing at the Artist Foundry, for the last 5 years, I saw a lot of producers wanting to be producers, but not really having that accountability understanding of what you are really accountable for when you choose to go on and produce a project. And it's sad to see so many frustrated, directors or other crew members that wound up having to pick up the slack of the producer. It's like, if you're the sort of person that, you struggle to take accountability for things, you can't be a producer. Producers tend to be the types of people who are over accountable. They sometimes take accountability for things they shouldn't, but they're, like they're blanketing everything. And so we have only a few minutes left, so I want to kick off maybe one more question, two if we have time, but we might run out. And don't rush don't rush through your answer. Feel free to say whatever you want to say. So it may only be one more question. I'm just kind of curious, for you, Dan, what is it that you currently have been producing and directing and wearing a lot of hats? Where are you hoping to get to, right? Like, what is the like when you got into film and you decided, yes, I'm gonna produce stuff, I'm gonna get into this, what's kind of the ultimate goal? Are you hoping to be, making films with big budgets in Hollywood? Are you wanting to stay local, et cetera, et cetera? Just, what are your ultimate goals and dreams in terms of producing and where you want to take this?
Yeah, so as far as producing kind of happened as a necessity for me to direct. And so the long-term goals would be to be able to create feature films. If that's local, heck yeah. If that's in Hollywood and they're, $100 million things, cool. As long as I can tell the stories that I want to tell in a way that moves people, that's success to me. If I'm able to create these projects and I can move people, like that is absolutely my motivation to do it. And so, like, if I could find producers that did the producing for me, hey man, like join my team. Let's make some movies so I can direct and write. But yeah, like I think that's the goal, is just to be able to tell these stories that I've got.
I envy your ability to wear both hats, because I started off in the industry as a director. My next project, I am actually not my next project, because I am technically producing something right now. But after that, there's going to be a film that I'm going to step into the director chair, which I haven't done for a number of years. I've mostly just been producing, but I found out about myself, I can't do both on the same shoot, right? Like one will suffer if I'm doing one or the other. And I don't think that that's the case for everybody. I think there are some directors that can produce and they can flip that switch, and they can just take one hat off and put the other one on. I can't. I get too emotionally wrapped up in everything and it just gets too convoluted. And you never want to be directing like a producer, and you never want to be producing like a director, So I envy your ability to swap back and forth. And maybe you don't. I know you say you would love to have producers come in and handle those things for you, but it's quite a task to do both, man.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. And I mean, I've got that crew that I've worked with for the past 5 years. Like, I mean, we all wear producers hats, like, and so to be able to switch from producer to director with a team that you have, we mentioned trust and things like that. When you've got a team that you work with that you trust, it makes that transition a lot easier. Yeah.
Awesome. I think we have like 3 minutes left, so I'll ask one more question and then we'll wrap it up. This will be for both of you. I'm just curious what your next project is. Kohl, you've kind of hinted at it, and I know that COVID is throwing a wrench in things. Ignore COVID. Creatively, or even logistically, right? What are the next what is the next project that each of you are kind of most interested in and focusing on? Let's do you, Kohl, first, and then Dan after Kohl. Go ahead and answer that.
It's always a hard question for me to answer, just because I try not to have too many irons in the fire, and I always end up having way too many irons in the fire. So it's like I got 5 that I'm really excited about, and chances of any of them happening are low, but one of them maybe, whatever. But I currently am working on a pilot. I got hired to write a pilot that was based on my dad. My dad was a family nurse practitioner, and he spent his after-hour times working, helping to treat undocumented immigrants. So I'm kind of turning this into, I don't know, kind of a series about, but it's a little more crime thriller. He's trying to, it goes on beyond there, but that's kind of the premise of him dealing with this, trying to help people in Arizona, which is, it's illegal to be undocumented, very much so. So, it's kind of a crime situation.
Cool. Excited to see that when that comes to light. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, so the next big thing we're trying to get made is a feature film. It'll be my first feature film. It's called Sin of Silence. It's about sexual abuse, and it's in the horror realm. Basically about a kid who starts uncovering secrets about his mom's past and his grandpa, and then all these spooky things start happening. And it's one of those things that the group I mentioned, 388 Collective, we spent a year going through that script page by page, line by line, making sure this line makes sense, this direction, and it's something that's really, really polished, and it's got a really solid message that I go off my gut a lot, and that thing's been on my gut, like saying, dude, you need to produce this, you need to get this made. So we're at the point of seeking investors and additional producers to help that come to light. So that's the next big thing I'm working on. and on all the other irons that are in the fire.
Yeah, everything else. Yeah.
Right.
Well, cool, man. That sounds awesome. I think I'm just going to leave this kind of panel with kind of one last thought. Especially due to COVID-19, I was having a conversation. I don't know if anybody tuned in, but before the Artist Foundry shut down, I was having a conversation with Geraldine Dreyfus, who maybe some of you know. She's an Academy Award-winning producer, mostly does documentaries, but she's been on some narratives as well. And we were talking about the future state of independent film, especially low-budget independent film. And she just said it's going to be crazy. It's going to be difficult for a lot of these, first-time filmmakers to get a film made, and these first-time producers to go out and raise this money just because of the economic impact that COVID-19 is going to have on our industry and the world. And I think that in times like this, it can be very discouraging to be a producer, because it's so hard to raise money right now. It's so hard to get anything greenlit and to get things going. But I actually think that we can take this time as a moment to kind of recollect ourselves and to stop chasing the trends of the industry. It's easy to get caught up in that, right? Especially when you're taking someone else's money and they want to make sure that you're going to be doing the smartest possible things with that money. It's really easy to look at what movies are selling and why, and to try and kind of play the game and to play the business, which I'm not saying anybody shouldn't. Obviously, if you're going to go into a movie, you're spending somebody else's money or even your own money, you should try to have some sort of business plan. But I think that right now is a time that, rather than try to chase the industry and chase the market and to make something that makes financial sense, spend your time on things that you actually care about. Spend your time on films that you love and that you want to see come to fruition, because the reality is that anytime someone's saying, oh, this type of film sells right now, or this type of film doesn't sell right now, all they're really looking at is what was happening in the market over the last couple of months. Nobody knows what the next big thing is. Just make good movies. Go out and make good movies. And if it makes sense in the market, great. If not, then you have a movie that you're actually proud of. So make stuff, raise money for things that you actually care about. That's what I would say right now. If you can raise money for things that you care about and you want to see get made. If you're going to be spending your own money, spend it on stuff that you love and that you want to see happen. So that's my final thought as we kind of conclude this chaotic producer panel. A huge thanks to Emily and Michael for setting this whole thing up. And obviously thanks to Kohl and Dan for sharing their wisdom on this panel and for being a part of it. So hopefully those of you who have tuned in have, had a good time and learned something. And I wish everybody the best as they're out there making their films.